I burned an entire 500 prompt budget from Cursor in about a week trying to get the app to refactor, and it got nowhere. It just completely broke. Spun up another account with Cursor to get another 500 credits, ran through another 500 prompts, still got nowhere. Was really frustrated, just felt like I'd been running my head into a wall over and over again. And then I saw your video about Desktop Commander. And I was really intrigued when I understood how that could work and how I could interact with my own file system without having to pay API costs. So after I used it for a few hours, and I was able to actually get the app to build and run after doing the null safety migration, it was like one of the best feelings of just exuberance and joy. And so you can probably read that in my comment that I left on your video, about how, thank you in all caps. And, this is a game changer and it's the biggest thing. You probably have the actual comment there somewhere, but that was a night and day, revelation to me. And I never looked back.
Hello, everyone. Today we have Michael on this video interview, and he's one of my, subscribers on YouTube, who also is user of Desktop Commander, a tool that I built. And he reached out, and we'll get to how that happened a bit later. But now I want to say hi to Michael.
How are you?
And ask him to introduce himself a little bit. Like who you are,
Hi.
what do you do? But before we gonna go back to Michael, this video is long. It does cover a lot of interesting topics, but not all of them are interesting to all of you. For that reason, I shared down below a detailed table of contents with timestamps, so that you can take a look and choose exactly topics that are interesting for you, or just watch the whole video, it's interesting. Maybe you are also a person who has a similar stories about how AI in this changing day and age helps you to unblock your business and be successful. If so, leave your stories down below in comments. Let's talk, and who knows, maybe in future we're gonna record a similar video with you. Also, if you are down below, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, share, or leave feedback and questions in comments. All of that helps this video, and I also will answer your feedback or questions if you have any for me. Now, with this out of the way, let's go back to Michael.
Well, my name is Michael Ajamian. I am a founder of a tech startup called AirCore, and we're developing a product called AirPro. I've been working on this since 2019, and it is a combination of a hardware product that would install in a customer's home in their forced air registers for heating or air conditioning. And these would go all across the house in all the different vents, and they communicate with room sensors and automatically adjust and open and close to allow more or less heat or air conditioning into the rooms that need it, depending on environment dynamics and how the house is built, and all sorts of different dynamic factors that would affect the temperature inside a house. And it's meant to smooth out all the different microclimates that somebody would find in their house.
I guess for our viewers, we can try to summarize it to something simpler, in the sense that you have hardware that you install in your home, and it helps to balance and make it more efficient to heat it up.
Yeah, so it balances the load, it evens out the temperature, but it also helps with efficiency, because as the air is being put where it needs to be, the heater is running less, trying to bring everything up and overheating certain rooms. I've been doing this since 2019. We raised a couple $100,000 back then, and we hired a software company to start development on the firmware and also on an app, which I can show you a demo of later. When COVID hit, it ended up ruining a lot of our progress. And, that was, of course, we were in the middle of software development, and that was a big outflow of money. And so as this all came together, as COVID hit, we ran out of money, and basically development had to stop for a while. And I've been working with the team in a limited capacity. We still have a little bit of money, and we were able to get some more work done. But for the big pushes of modernizing our app, refactoring it, getting it branched off to iOS, building the website, building the back end with databases, getting all that would have been so much.
But wait, so you guys started in 19, COVID hit, off-railed you guys, you almost stopped, but you're continuing a little bit, and recently
Well, I was
more?
Yeah, I was continuing working the whole time. When COVID hit and we stopped development, the firmware and the app were both quite buggy, and it worked sort of in my own house, but there was no way I could deploy it to any customers or any demo houses at that time. So we were kind of stuck. And so I was able to work with the software company to at least resolve enough of the errors that it was stable, but the app still needed an awful lot of work. And that's the primary way that you would be interacting with the hardware. So that was kind of a point where I was stuck, and I was trying to raise more money to continue development, but in COVID times, and the economy was not doing very well, and investors are not really eager to just throw a bunch of money at somebody to keep working on software. They want to see the light at the end of the tunnel on when they can start seeing real progress and start seeing return on their investment. So with the launch of Claude in 3.7 in February, I decided to jump headfirst into all of this and leverage some of my disparate background knowledge and try to tie it all together into working on the code myself.
So basically, you were blocked by not being a technical person yourself and running out of the money, but now AI actually helps you to restart on a lower budget without being a technical person.
That's right. So just a quick background. I'm semi-technical. I was a network administrator for a multi-office real estate company for several years. I've grown up building computers and working on computers and all of that kind of stuff. And my business is installing home tech and home theater systems, including networking and Wi-Fi. So I'm not a stranger to technology, but I've never been a coder. The only code I've ever written was HTML back in high school in the 90s. But I've been a software company customer for several years now. And so that provided enough of a bridge for me to start working with the AI and expanding my own knowledge. As you'll see, half of my work is actually doing code work, but the other half of it is actually doing research so that I know what to do for the code work, because I've learned that asking Claude or any AI to do something and figure it out is usually not going to work if you're doing anything more than just one shot vibe coding something from scratch. But if you're working in an existing code base or several code bases and you need things to be unified so that they integrate together, you definitely need to work on a plan first.
Yeah, you usually need to find, like exactly in this case, in a sense, you can make it research and build things at the same time. But when you're exploring and researching, when you have already a system that needs to work and it's too big, then you don't need to give it some kind of a hey, this is the skeleton,
right?
That you need to stay close to, or otherwise it may go to one place, forget about the other place, and do something that actually doesn't work together.
And I can give you examples. Just the other day, I was working on trying to implement databases for my website because I want to be able to start collecting call to action. People who put in their email addresses and people who want to be informed. Well, all that has to go somewhere. And so, for the databases that I was working on, I needed one that could handle the time series data that my mesh generates, because every minute it's uploading data, and that's 20 devices in my house every minute. After a month, that's about 900,000 rows of data. And as you extrapolate that out across more and more customers, that starts to add up really fast. So I was trying to come up with a
noob question. All the data in your case is sent to your server, not to something local?
So for right now, it's being sent to a server that I have running downstairs. For production, I've already actually spun up a couple of VPSs. So I have one that's running a Supabase that is hosting my customer data, and then another one that's running a specialized timescale DB database that is not working yet, but it will be, and my data will be going up to that. But in order to work on that kind of a complicated schema, and then I have Auth0 providing authentication on top of all of that, Claude would always try to start going off, oh, we can do it this way, and oh, yeah, we can make it work like this. And it's like, no, we're working on a very, very specific thing. And so I had to create a pretty big framework that was very specific, that it would reference on every prompt that I was working on. So it would always keep working in the same direction and not start doing random tangents and offshoots.
I think you usually just split it. In a sense, you try to get a sense of how the structure would work on a large scale and then ask it to work in a compartment, instead of asking it the whole, because when it does both things at the same time, it can get a little bit weird.
But see, this is partly because I'm not an expert in this, so I've never worked on databases before, and so
I just wonder what it would one thing I can share though, the one thing I learned a long time ago, and I think it's one of the best advices of working with AI, is that you can ask it to, you need to step back. in a sense, not to ask it, how do you solve this problem? Like one of the first thing I've built was an expert creator. You ask it a question, and first thing it does is, okay, I'm trying to understand what kind of experts usually work with this problem, and gives the
Mm-hmm.
list. And I'm saying, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like 1, 3, and 5 sound like a good one. And then next thing it does is, okay, what the methodologies this expert use to solve this kind of problems? And it outputs that, says, okay, does it make sense to use any of these to you? Like, okay, I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this sounds good. And next
Right.
thing is that, okay, now given the problem, given the experts, given the methodologies, let's make a plan of how to solve your problem.
Mm.
It basically makes you go a little bit backwards. Like, like there is a methodology of like asking 7 times a why. Like, why
Right.
do you want to balance the heating in your house?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to save on energy. Why do you want to save energy? In a sense, like you need to
Right.
play stupid to go further from the problem, and then you see fool. Because when you focus on the consequence of the problem, you don't see the cause.
That's interesting. One thing I'll add to that is when you're doing those kind of exploratory questions, it often helps to do them often or do them a couple of times in a new chat so that you're not reusing the old
Yep.
context so that it'll find a new route and it doesn't just fall back to the old one. Because that was
Yeah.
one thing, for example, in my database journey, which I spent about a week just doing research, I was asking the same questions of Claude, Grok, and Perplexity, and getting different answers on all three of them. And then I would, using my own brain, I would find the common threads out of each of those, synthesize that into a direction, and then ask more questions about that. And that's how I was kind of working myself into, hopefully not a corner, and hopefully into a
You
working
actually,
solution.
I think you actually came to, and one thing that I also know for some time, one weird thing with LLMs and how they work with it is different from us. They don't forget. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're continuing in the same chat, all of that still influences the thing, and it
Yep.
focuses it. It's like, again, like it's from user interviews. There is a thing that you usually don't ask what you want to ask. You start from afar because this allows
Right.
the person to say to you something you don't know. But if you immediately ask them something very specific, they kind of like, from all the things they could speak about, it's like they're now thinking only about this, and they will not remember
Yep.
about this thing you didn't know how to ask about.
That's very true.
LLMs are very
That's very
similar.
true.
Like
Yeah.
if you give them in context something and then telling them to forget, don't use it, no, not this way, it's still there. It still kind of nags at their attention, and they're
Well,
still can like
it's
revert to
like
that
when
thing.
somebody says, "Don't think of the color red." You know, that's all you're going to
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
now.
It's like LLMs have this problem way more than humans. But
Yes, yes, I've noticed that.
anyways, we kind of
So
like went to a fun tangent. Yeah, indeed.
that's all right. So I've got this. If you want to see the quick demo of what the app looks like in the interaction with the system. So this app was already in existence before, but it was only running on Android, and it was pretty buggy. It would only have about a 50% success rate of actually connecting because it connects locally using Bluetooth to one of the devices, and then it pulls the config from everything else. So I integrated this progress bar. I was able to get the deployment to work on iOS. This is running on my Mac, actually, emulating an iPad right now. So this shows all the different rooms, and then you can click into the rooms, and you can see the sensor, and you can see the vent, and you can see the data for those devices, and then there's additional configuration options and things like that inside here. So that's generally how the app works, and you can see here it's currently syncing to the devices, and then I also have a ability to visualize temperatures, which is currently not working in the app, but I can show you very quickly that it does work in this. And so this is a D3 graphing project that I've developed using Desktop Commander in Claude. And it's basically querying my database that's running downstairs using the Supabase REST API. And it allows you to see the data for the different devices in the different rooms. And you can also see them on a week-long timetable, or you could even see them on a month-long timetable. And you can also see the signal strength and the positions and the battery level, and you can also compare it with all the other rooms in
Sounds
the
like
house.
mission control for your, I don't know, heating.
Well, that's exactly it, because the product, while it's cool, it lives in the floor or in the wall. You never see it really, and primary interaction point is going to be the app and then these graphs to be able to see what is actually happening. So I developed the D3 graph as the base template, and then I will be adapting it to run in the Flutter app using D4 for Dart. And I'm also going to be putting it into my website, which is here. And so there's going to be a admin panel where customers can log in, and with their credentials, they'll be able to see data for their mesh network and the temperature readings from their system. So that's a quick demo of what I'm working on.
Okay. And let's go back a little bit. You mentioned that you learned about the Sonnet 3.7 around February. How did you learn about that? And what kind of tools you tried?
I've been curious about AI. I've been interested in it since I was into computers. Everybody's had the thought, oh, you know what I'm trying to do? Can't you just make that thing do that? And people have said that at their monitors for decades. And so now we're actually at the point where that can actually happen. So when Claude 3.7 came out, I was already a light user of Grok, and I had done a couple of Python projects in Grok, and it was cool, it was fun, but I was not anywhere near the point of wanting to work on my own code bases with it. And then when Claude 3.7 came out, I started seeing YouTube videos of what people were accomplishing with it, and I knew that the big pain point in my system right now was the app, which was written in an older version of Flutter. It wasn't null safety compliant with the newer versions of Flutter and Dart. So it couldn't be listed on the Google Play Store as it had currently been. There was no iOS branch. And so I decided to try experimenting with it. And so I first started using the first one I jumped into. I was able to start working on a website, not what you see here. And it looked all right. I don't know if I still have that. I could probably pull it out of the Git repository somewhere. But I was running into a lot of issues because the first thing I was trying to do was refactor it and modify the code to be null safety compliant so I could upgrade the SDKs for Dart and Flutter and everything else. As you can imagine, the app is very complicated because it's communicating via Bluetooth to a lot of our devices, and the app was full of null values. And as somebody who has no idea what that even is, I mean, I know now, but I didn't then, and I didn't really understand the impacts of that. I burned an entire 500 prompt budget from Cursor in about a week trying to get the app to refactor, and it got nowhere. It just completely broke. Spun up another account with Cursor to get another 500 credits, which was partly to get free credits, but also because I actually wanted it to be another account that I have. So ran through another 500 prompts, still got nowhere. Was really frustrated, just felt like I'd been running my head into a wall over and over again. And then I saw your video that came out and about Desktop Commander. And I was really intrigued. When I had first signed up for Claude, I didn't understand API versus Claude Desktop, using Cursor versus using Rue code or Klein. These were all new concepts to me. So I actually forgot. The first thing I started doing was I used Rue code and Klein with API for Claude, which is not the best way to learn if you've never done this before. I pretty quickly burned through about $100. It was a good learning experience, but I had already paid the $200 for the yearly Claude desktop subscription. So now I was already $300 into Claude. And when your video came out and I saw how you could integrate an MCP, which I had heard about, but I didn't really understand what it was. When I understood how that could work and how I could interact with my own file system without having to pay API costs, that was a night and day, revelation to me, and I never looked back. So I've not used any more API costs on Rue code or Klein. I still have Cursor, which I use very rarely, but I use it from time to time, primarily for access to Gemini and O3 mini models. And then all my Claude work I do through either Claude Desktop using Desktop Commander and some other MCPs, or I use Claude Code, which coincidentally it became available to Claude Max subscribers, which I upgraded from the $20 a month to the $100 a month Claude plan like 2 days before Anthropic unlocked Claude Code for monthly subscribers. And that was a big reason why I didn't use Claude Code either. It looked really interesting. I was kind of interested in it, but as soon as I learned that there was the API cost attached to it, I just, knowing that I don't know enough, I knew that was going to be a very expensive route to go. So it's
Actually,
interesting. There's a lot of things are changing in real time, day by day as we're going through this.
yeah, that's the AI field. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like there
it's
was
like
a
the Wild
feeling that it,
West.
yeah, there was a feeling that it was gonna be like that in 2023, and then it actually went slower for a year. But then, like last year, Sonnet 3.5, and now it's freaking crazy. I think last half a year, it's like I think new models each month that change things a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, about what you mentioned about costs and API costs and something, I actually did test and run some calculation around Claude Code, and when you use it through API on small task, it ate something like 60 cents for
Hmm.
me on API, and in my calculations, the equivalent of that in cost through max subscription would be around 6 cents.
Yeah.
So it's very different in how you use it. The only issue that I know that started to happen for last month, I think, because they are gaining popularity, was that they have some compute capacity problems, which
Mm.
causes some problems in the sense that you get less quota than they promise, or it just works flaky in a
Interesting.
few ways. But otherwise, like before all that max subscription, it was like I haven't seen any problems.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another fun story that you shared about how this like video even happened. Can
Yeah.
you share how that happened?
Well, it kind of leads right into that video of yours that I saw where you introduced your desktop commander MCP. So after I used it for a few hours, and I was able to actually get the app to build and run after doing the null safety migration. Um, it was like one of the best feelings of just exuberance and joy, and so you can probably read that in my comment that I left on your video. About how thank you in all caps, and this is a game changer and it's the biggest thing. You probably have the actual comment there somewhere, but it was the first comment I've ever left on a YouTube video. I've always been kind of one of those. I don't subscribe that much. I don't leave comments. I watch, I appreciate, I learn. But maybe that's a personal fault. Maybe that's just a personality thing. But your video elicited the first comment I've ever put on a YouTube video because the value that I was able to realize, and having had run my head into the wall, nonstop for the last couple of weeks before that, it was just so clear what a game changer Desktop Commander was, at least in my use case, and I'm sure in a lot of other people's as well. So you did a video last week or a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, where you were highlighting the Bright Data MCP, and you were using it and Desktop Commander to do a job hunt for you and build you a resume. And it ended up pulling that comment that I had left you out of that first YouTube video. And as I was watching your video, you're reading my comment back to me. And so I started laughing out loud, and I decided I had to reach out to you and at least start a chat with you and see if it would go somewhere. So here we
Yeah,
are.
to summarize, like the sequence of events that Michael wrote to me that, hey, like you read my comment on last video, which was a comment that AI picked as a review of Desktop Commander, as example of a comment, how people react to using Desktop Commander. And I read it
Right.
on the video, and that was from comment from another, the comment that Michael already spoke about. So it was kind of funny and now we're recording this video. So one
Yep.
thing to the next.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so Michael, you've mentioned that you burned at least 2 subscriptions of 500 messages in Cursor before, and it actually didn't get you over the line. But you mentioned
Yeah.
that when you tried Desktop Commander with Claude, it actually got you over the line in 2 hours, which basically, in terms of subscription, it's what, $1 or whatever? Like, in a sense, it's like a fraction of your
A
monthly quota.
fraction. Yeah, a fraction.
So
There's a few reasons.
so wait. Here for me, the question is that it's for me still puzzling because
Mhm.
Cursor by default also uses the same model. So what is the difference between Claude and Desktop Commander and Cursor using the same Sonnet 3.5 or 3.7 or 4 now? Like why? Like for me, it's still puzzling. I have some ideas, but I'm curious to hear also you in a sense that it's puzzling to me.
I've got a few ideas. Obviously, I don't know. I don't know the back end of these products. So with Cursor, if you're just using the standard plan, $20 a month, and you use the Claude thinking the Claude Sonnet thinking model, That burns 2 of your requests instead of just 1. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And it also, you're limited to, I think, 120,000 token context window in Cursor. In order to get access to the full 200,000 token context window, you have to enable the max feature in Cursor, which at that point is basically like starting to hit the API again. I mean, it's not as expensive, but you're being charged, I think, 5 cents for every prompt and every tool call on top of your original $20 a month. And so for me, the math doesn't really work out in that one. I would rather, if I'm going to be paying per use, I would rather
but
just do it straight through the...
You're now discussing costs or some specifics of
But
how
that,
the API works. What is really interesting for me is that it didn't still get you over the line while still using the whole subscription.
well, I think that's because, I think part of that is because of the context window, because I was not using the max feature on Cursor. It didn't even exist 2 months ago. So I was limited in I was already out from the start. I was already cut off 80,000 tokens in context of what I could do between Desktop Commander running in Claude Desktop and Cursor. So that's already 80,000 tokens, almost half, which is huge. I also think that Cursor, and I've also been using Claude Code lately, which I think does work better than Cursor. But I think there's a real parity between Claude Code and Claude Desktop using Desktop Commander. And I think the big difference is the coding agents like Claude Code and Cursor and Augment Code, I think they're tuned specifically for coding tasks, which makes them probably very good at coding in a clean way, or in a cleaner way, maybe, with fewer errors, let's say. But I think using Desktop Commander in Claude Desktop, I think you're getting access to the full mind of Claude, which includes coding, but it also includes, I think, more broad reasoning and thinking beyond just coding tasks. And I have a feeling, like myself, I mean, I'm pulling various elements of my life experience in all sorts of disparate areas to work on what I'm working on here. And I think the same thing probably applies in the difference between Cursor and Claude Desktop, is my guess.
Yeah, this is somewhat my feeling and observation as well, in a sense that one thing that is obviously happening is that the model is a little bit different. That to some extent, Anthropic and Claude Desktop is selling compute, and it's selling compute also through API to companies like Cursor or Windsurf, which then need to actually optimize of not spending it too much. So their prompts inside are very conservative. They're trying to rather be very specific and doing exactly what user did and not more,
Right.
which actually is not enough, I think, especially if you're not a technical person. And in that sense, and again, they are probably tuned to doing exactly what the experienced person said.
And that's exactly it. I think if I knew what I was doing, and I could go into something like Cursor and I could say, I want you to work on this file, I want you to work on this function, and I want you to do this to it. If I had enough knowledge to be able to do that, I would probably have a better experience in Cursor. But I don't. And so I need to take more of, I'm acting more as the customer to the software company, sending what I would be sending to the software company. This worked, this didn't work. I saw this in the logs. I noticed this behavior when I clicked on this. What does this lead you to believe? What does this mean? Whereas an experienced person like you would probably say, you need to clean function in this file so that it can communicate and call this and like I wouldn't know how to phrase that.
And one thing that I'm starting to think for some time about this is that, like, firstly, probably I would mention that one thing different than prompt in that sense, I did say what I feel about Cursor, what I feel about Claude Desktop exactly, not Claude Code. Claude Code is somewhere in the middle, I guess, but Claude Desktop is prompted differently. It's prompted for a general user, and it behaves more like an expert in that sense, not like a junior that does exactly what you asked. It expects the user not to be a specialist and not defining the task well. So it expects to go like when you hire an expert, he's gonna go like 3 steps more than you ask because he knows what needs to be done.
Yes.
I'm not saying Claude is expert. It does go in wrong directions.
I'll say the new version 4, is pretty impressive. I'm definitely noticing it's a lot smarter than 3.7. I mean, 3.7 was pretty smart, but 4, I'm noticing the same kind of things where 3.7 would go over and over and over something, trying to fix it and never would. 4 is actually going over it once or twice and then actually fixes it.
Yeah, I haven't actually tested it too much yet. I mean, how long are we? Like, we're 3-4 days?
Like 2 days. Yeah, but I was using it all day yesterday, so I got a lot of hands-on time with it.
I actually haven't used it too much. Also, I was trying, but they do have capacity issues because of people trying it a lot, of
Oh,
course.
really?
Yeah,
I've
in a
been
sense,
lucky. I haven't had much issue.
yeah, because I actually was getting the pop-ups with errors in the sense like we had hit an unexpected capacity error and like your chat
Oh,
is down.
really? I wonder if it's regional. I wonder if they have different servers around different on the globe.
Hard to say. I think it's time of the day. It's many things. I know that even for OpenAI back in the day, 23, it performed
Hmm.
worse. Like I'm in Europe. It performed worse in the evening when the US is waking up.
Ah. Yeah.
Because it's probably some kind of spike in capacity for them. And what's interesting
Yep.
about what OpenAI was doing about it, they definitely were dealing down the tokens or something. Like it's the
Hmm.
same model, but it's more stupid in my evening.
Oh, interesting. That's very
So
interesting.
at least this was observation of working with them in 23. But anyways, back to Claude and Cursor and prompts. Yeah, there is something weird about Claude Desktop exactly because it felt like at least they're all, I know they changed prompt recently. At least the older prompt definitely felt like more like so I heard people developers reacting to how Desktop Commander works with it as it's paranoid in a sense it's like
Hmm.
goes like 100 steps further than I asked or whatever and so on. So there is a little bit of difference of how you work with this kind of things because
Hmm.
it feels like there are modes or flavors to them because they all use one prompt. But in reality, for different tasks, you maybe want a different. Now I want you to be a junior, and now I want you to be an expert, or whatever,
Interesting.
and go paranoid or not. For different
So
tasks, you need different one.
have you used that role assignment? Do you use that a lot? Because the only one I've ever done is think like an architect, and delegate, but I've never really tried delegating to different specific roles like junior, senior.
So
Do
what's
you notice
interesting,
a
I
difference in the
don't.
performance?
What's interesting is that I do not in Claude too much, but I feel like I would try. Problem, but one of the problem with it is that I cannot still remove the system prompt of Claude itself. So the
Hmm.
prompt is still there, and as we discussed a little bit earlier, it doesn't forget, which means that whatever you say to it, and it will have an effect. It's just less effect than if you actually could overwrite the system prompt in that
Right.
sense. And I do know that True Code, I think, is a little bit popular because they kind of have those modes, but
Hmm.
then most people are not experts to actually set correct mode, as far as I can
Yeah.
say. So it doesn't work for everyone. But yeah, it's interesting in that sense that for now it feels like those tools have flavors. Like Cursor for me is the most specific and most conservative in what it does, while Windsurf is a step to more proactive one, and you could sometimes call Claude Desktop a desktop commander crazy because it like just takes full control on like how can I achieve the goal.
I mean, it does feel like you're getting tapped into the full power of the Claude, mind when you're using Claude Desktop. It does feel like it's the most direct tap in. I imagine the API is similar, but like I said, as a novice, I'm not prepared to spend the kind of money
Mhm.
required to work on the API.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, if I could ask one.
Okay.
Um, One thing that I've noticed with Claude Code as well as Claude Desktop when I'm in research mode is the subagent delegation. So when I'm in Claude Code, for example, I can write a prompt, and I actually have a system prompt in Claude Code where I tell it to think like an architect and on complicated tasks to delegate subtasks to subagents. And using that, for example, in Claude Code, I'm able to get some chats that are going 800, 900,000 tokens because each subagent is burning 100, 150,000 tokens, and I'm running 5 or 6 of those. I've only been able to pull that off once or twice. It doesn't always do that. Um, but I notice in Claude Desktop, it doesn't seem to allow you to use subagents unless you're doing the research mode. Do you know, is there anything you can do about that through Desktop Commander?
Not in Claude Desktop, sadly, because Claude, like Desktop Commander itself, only gives the tools to the thing. It doesn't actually have access to like spending tokens itself, at least at this moment. Which means that it's only the Cloud Desktop itself that is spending tokens in that sense.
Hmm.
And in that sense, we cannot do that in setup with Claude Desktop. I know that there are some MCPs that kind of did this, but they did this differently, where you need to provide your API key to the MCP, so then it
Hmm.
uses API actually internally to pull that off. In
Yeah.
that sense, yeah, this is an interesting thing that Claude Desktop and Claude Code do internally, in the sense that they have sub tools that can also use your subscription. And I wonder actually whether at some point it will be possible that Anthropic will allow to use subscription for not their own products, which honestly is
Mm,
possible. I think you can
yeah.
hack your way towards that today, just as will be against their terms of service and so on. But it will
I don't
be,
know. They just. I was just going to say they just released the SDK the other
yeah.
day when they
I
released.
wonder if, yeah, but it says SDK for Claude Code, which is code oriented. I mean,
Oh, I
for
see.
more
I
things
see.
than just that.
I
In the
thought it was
sense,
for
what
Claude
if
in
I
general.
want? Yeah, it's I think it's Claude Code SDK. I could be wrong though. I need to check. I haven't checked yet. What exactly
Okay.
is it about? My impression was it's because they released it. I think one the demo case they mention is using Claude Code inside of GitHub Actions, which is like you submit
Hmm.
code and it like reacts to it and submits a review of that code or whatever on
Right.
GitHub. That is Claude Code type of workload. This is not Claude without the system prompt of Claude Code
I
or
see.
something.
I see. I see.
But I could be wrong. I need to check. I could be lying to you guys.
I don't think you're lying, but like we said earlier, the landscape of all this is changing daily. So just
Yeah,
keeping up is a full-time job.
I'm not keeping up. Just checking part of it. Let's try to do something with Desktop Commander. Show us how
All
you
right.
use it, and we see if we can do it even better.
All right. Let me share the screen. Expert. My primary website I developed and it built it in Next.js 14. And then when I built this graphing project, Claude decided to build it in Next.js 15, which has completely different dependencies and uses React 19, which is so new that most of the other dependencies don't even have compatible versions for it. So it was able to work to build me this, but when I went to migrate this into my website, I realized quickly that there was a big issue. And so I had to do a research project of, okay, do I want to update my website from version 14 to 15, or do I want to downgrade the graphing from version 15 to 14 so that I can get it to work? Because I'm not really interested in redesigning everything all over again. So this is an example of not Desktop Commander. This was actually no, this was Desktop Commander because it read all of my files. Yes, that's right. So this was Desktop Commander using Claude Opus 4, not in research mode, but with extended thinking, and it utilized Firecrawl and web search and Desktop Commander searching the code base of both projects to get an idea of what is in there. And so it did an analysis, and then it realized that it had some issues with React 19. So then it did some more searching for specific React 19 issues, and then it gave me the recommendation that I want to bring the D3 project down to 14 instead of bringing the website up to 15,
That's interesting.
which which was fine with me because it took a while to get the website into shape. I mean, it's kind of like this vibe coding or grind coding as we as we referred to it the other day. It's kind of like being a sculptor or modeling something out of clay. You start out with just a raw rough shape, and then with each prompt that you run, you're honing it down a little bit, and you're shaving it down, you're refining it, and
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you don't refine too much because just like a sculptor, you can't put back what you took out, right? And so you want to take a little bit and a little bit, and then assess and see if what you've got is good, and if it's a good place to keep working from, or if you're completely off somewhere and nothing works and everything's broken, then maybe you want to back up a little bit and try a different path.
Yeah. What what Michael is speaking about is we spoke the other day to discuss whether we want to do this recording or not. And one thing observation I have over the at least half a year is that people who are non-technical but maybe somewhere close are getting excited about AI enabling them to start like doing something like software engineering. They tried before, but for whatever the reason gave up. They wanted to do something else, and now they're
Right.
like again ignited that hey, maybe now with AI I can try again. And it's one thing when you wipe code something small, that's okay. This is fun and magical. When you're starting to work on larger things, AI does struggle, like humans struggle on large code bases. And then it starts to feel weird because it's still like, even if you're not writing single line of code, it for whatever the reason still feels like software engineering because you're still iterating, you're still debugging, you're still trying to understand how the system works. without maybe even ever seeing the code, but weirdly that feeling of software engineering didn't left. And
Yeah.
what I see with some people who decided that they don't like that feeling of software engineering, and that they will be doing something else, and they will be paying software engineer to do that work. And now
Right.
they're excited. Oh, AI can allow me to do it myself. They do
It's
it,
pretty exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they do it. They feel again that it feels the same, even though they are not writing the code, and they still decide, no, I want someone else to be doing that.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. I mean, you can see, um, just to close the loop on this, I was able to get it to integrate in with the website yesterday. But this is one chat where, after we had already created the plan, I'm saying, okay, I want to actually implement this plan now. I want to integrate it with my dashboard. And I tell it, here's the path to the code base of the website, and it already knows the path to the D3 because it's already been working on it, and it's all in the plan. And so here's the transcript basically, and I don't know how many times it called the tool. It's got to be 50 or 60. I mean, look where we are on the progress bar here. And
It
this
is
was
crazy how what it does.
And this is with Claude Sonnet 4. This is not with Opus. This was with Sonnet. And I'll just say that I've noticed, even on the fixed monthly cost plan, you will burn through your allotment a lot faster using Opus. So I use Opus for the heavy lifts of figuring out the plan, looking at the different code bases, and deciding what to do. And then I found that just using Sonnet 4 is fine. As you can see, I mean, look at all these tool calls that it did. It's reading directories, it's executing commands, it's reading files, it's editing blocks, and it just kept going and going. And then at this point, I stopped it. And one thing I'll say, especially if you're an amateur like me in coding, do not auto allow command executions. You can auto allow reading, you can auto allow listing, you can auto allow searching. Up to you if you want to auto allow editing and writing. For execute command, I do not do that because sometimes, especially in Claude Desktop, it'll want to install packages that you don't want it to install. And if you're not paying attention, especially if you're just doing the YOLO mode and you just tell it to go and you walk off and make a sandwich and you come back, you're gonna have to look through every single one of these things, especially if there's a problem, because you're not going to know where that came from.
I think I would love to actually make it so that you can allow it. I think the real problem is not that it went to install the packages. The real problem is that there is no way to time travel back and say, okay, you've explored in this direction, but like somewhere here, no, backtrack here and go the other direction. Like
I mean, as the newbie, that was a big learning curve, was figuring out how to manage packages and how to manage the build environment. That was a whole learning curve just on its own.
Because like part of the problem is that maybe if it was like committing to Git these things, like so you have version control, the problem is that it's not only about code, it's also about what other changes it did that are not in the code. And those
and
are
my
harder
understanding
to.
And my understanding is that your packages and all that stuff doesn't usually get uploaded to Git, right? Usually that gets ignored.
Yeah, usually you have some kind of config that says what kind of packages you're using right now, but some of the things it does may so it's not like code is only part of the thing. Part of the thing is environment it's running in. If it starts changing the environment, it's not captured in Git. So usually you want something else. You want some kind of a way to time travel in states of the system somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't like, in theory, you can do something like Docker and snapshots or whatever, but that's actually takes a lot of memory or hard disk space to do this kind of thing.
And it's a whole nother skill set to learn, which I've
Yeah.
learned, but learning Docker is a whole nother animal.
But I do have another question for you in the
Sure.
sense of like we are doing like you're discussing the migration, like you have two projects and you that are using the version that is too different, cannot be reconciled.
Yep.
And I did this kind of migration on Desktop Commander before, and one thing that does really help is having some kind of tests. I'm wondering if you are playing with tests.
I would
maybe wait a second, just to finish, because the way I would usually do this kind of like I would feel uncomfortable doing this kind of migration myself. In a sense, I would be afraid that it's going to get a lot of things wrong. It's going to miss things when it migrates from one large code base on one stack to something different, even if it's just downgrading version that is pretty considerably changed. But
right.
but what would make me feel better is if I had a set of tests that I know that they succeed against the version before migration, and I could run them after the migration to let the AI know that, hey, okay, you did it.
So I'll tell you. So for the app project, when I was trying to migrate to the newer version of Flutter and Dart, um, this is one of those chats, and the software company that built the app originally had a test folder that had a bunch of tests in it. So I was able to use those because in this app, there's very complicated parsing structures that need to be perfect for everything to work. And as I did the null migration, a lot of that got broken. And so I had to lean on the tests very heavily in order to actually get the app to work properly. But beyond that, I don't know enough to know how to set up a test. I mean, I can ask Claude, create a test for this function or something, if that's even the right terminology. But I don't know enough to know if the test is written properly, or if the test will be written in such a way to conform to the broken code that might currently exist. So I'd love to use tests. I just don't know enough background to know how to actually implement them properly.
Yeah, so maybe in this sense you would use what is called like end-to-end tests, but because those are usually done by inspecting the UI, and I'm not
And that's
sure
what I
about
do.
Flutter. Yeah,
I
but
mean,
you can do it by
that's my
hand.
experience as a customer is just QA manually running through the app, trying
Yeah,
every
but
single
you can
function and
automate
button.
that. You can give
I
it a
wish I knew
scenario.
how.
Yeah, like you ask it. Like next thing you do something around it, ask it to, hey, like this is the app. This is how I manually test that. Can you create for me the tests end to end, like using whatever technology you seem to fit based on the project,
Hmm.
to try to do this kind of test. And one of the best practices is to sometimes ask a test that fails and then ask it to, like, in a sense that, like, problem is that if it wrote a test that succeeds immediately, then you never know if it's going to fail when it's going to be wrong. So you
Hmm.
need to test that part. So maybe you ask it to like write a test that does this, what I do manually as a test, run it, it succeeds, and then ask it, okay, now break the functionality and check if it fails.
Okay.
So now you have a test that fails when it's not working and succeeds when it's working. And the best part of it, now it can use execute command maybe in auto mode to actually run the test, see that it's not working after the migration, and try to continue working. Obviously, it can still run into loops, depends
Hmm.
how the problem is, but it at least helps. It gives it itself a way to verify if whether what it did works.
I see. That makes sense. I will try that. So yeah. So just to this was just to show that like I'm looking at plans, I'm looking at firmware files, I'm looking at more plans, and it's reading the app code base all at the same time, and it was able to synthesize all that and put it all together.
And I see you put all of that into the knowledge of the project in Claude.
Yeah, and I've noticed this is probably about the most you ever really want to put in for the project knowledge, because I don't fully understand, but my understanding is that this is basically cached data. This is basically the equivalent of if you were to cache
So
files.
even if it's cached, it's more of a cost saving for Anthropic itself, because the
Hmm.
model itself always works up to 200,000 tokens, which means
Right.
that this does use it always in all of the
But it
chats in
uses
the
it
project.
less, doesn't it? Isn't it like a more efficient loading or something?
Well, it's not for you or the for quality of the chat. This is something like me, this is something I would be using as a creator of kind of a project that uses their API to save on the cost for myself.
I see. I
but
see.
but it doesn't change anything about the quality or the size of the chat. So when you
Ah,
have,
okay.
in
But
that sense,
I did
this
notice that if
will
you,
make your chats smaller.
I was just going to say, I noticed that if you start loading this thing up, I mean, it's loading all of this into every prompt, as far as I
Yeah,
know, and so it eats up your context much
yeah.
faster. So I
In
typically
that
don't go above
sense,
10, 20. This one I
yeah,
went up to 30 because I needed all of this stuff, and some of these
yeah.
later chats I think ended up pretty short because because the context was getting
Actually,
burned up.
there is a hack that I'm using these days of how I use those knowledge files. I'm still experimenting. Maybe it's not a good idea, but I wanted to share in the sense that I am actually not putting all of this kind of knowledge into the knowledge of the project. Instead, I have a file that tells me that, hey, the knowledge file folder is here, and here is table of content of what kind of knowledge files are there. Depending on what user asks, pull and read them. What it gives me.
Can you say that again?
In a sense that I have a folder with text files, similar
Just
to
on your file system.
Yes. And the only I have only one file in project knowledge that just has a table of content of like where do you look for them and what they are.
Okay.
And in an instruction that based on what user asks, go and read files you think would be useful for this chat. It gives me two bonuses. One, not all of that is always in all of the chats. It's gonna go and read only parts of the knowledge that it seems relevant. It can make mistakes. It can decide not to read when it should have, or maybe read when it shouldn't have. But one other very interesting thing about it is that you can do that I kind of like, and I kind of miss that in Claude, is that if chat went in a way that goes counter to what I think it should have known from knowledge files, I can ask it, hey, why did you do that? Knowledge files told you to do something else. Is there something wrong about knowledge files why you chose to go the wrong way? And it then would explain itself, and then I would ask, okay, how would you rewrite the knowledge file so the next time in this situation you go the correct way? And it proposes
That's
the change.
Interesting.
And problem with Claude is I cannot force the chat itself to change then the knowledge files. You cannot add knowledge files from the chat. You need to go and actually copy paste or whatever and find correct knowledge file or whatever. But if they are in files, it can.
Yeah.
So I'm forcing it to update its own prompting, its own knowledge.
Have you ever used the memory MCP?
Yeah.
You can see it's disabled. I started using it, but I ended up turning it off.
For me, the big question about it is what's the difference with files? Because honestly, it is files. It's just files not on your file system. It's files in some kind of a database or whatever the knowledge manager uses. So for me, like, and if your files are like Wikipedia, that they are cross-linked, then for me, there is definitely no difference then. And somehow I'm just preferring them to use files because I also can open them in the other application if I want or do whatever I want with them. They are files. So, like, I think if you have cross-linked files, that is already in knowledge base. So for that reason, I'm not playing too much with the knowledge, like automatic knowledge keepers, because I'm not like I don't see any value beyond what files give me that way.
That's interesting. One other thing I'll just say about the planning and all of that is, and I'm gonna use your idea, instead of loading them all in here, just have the one file that has a path to a folder that has all of the knowledge that I want for that chat.
Plus a little bit of instructions that are general, just not everything.
Okay. You got to stay on top of the plans that you have in that folder, though, or the knowledge base, because in an example that I was working on yesterday, I was working on the database stuff, and on one of them, it was I'm using Auth0 as my authentication provider, and I guess in one of their latest updates, they've changed the file structure path, where instead of it being /API/auth, it's now /auth/API or whatever it is, but it's different. And so a lot of the research documentation that I had made didn't account for that difference. And a lot of the research documentation was using the older file structure, the file path structure. And as I was implementing it, at one point, Claude noticed, oh, wait, there's a new thing for version 4.6, which is the version that you're running. So we don't want the API route. We want this other route. And so it half did that, half didn't. Half the files were pointing to the right thing. Half the files were pointing to the right thing. And then on the subsequent chat, I told Claude to continue fixing that. And it reverted back to the old implementation instead of continuing on with the new one. And I realized that the reason why it did that was because in my project knowledge, some of the plans were still referencing that other path, even though I was specifically telling it in the chat to do the new one. So one thing that
as I already said before, it doesn't forget. It always like if wrong idea is in the chat, it's sometimes very hard to force it to not use the wrong idea that is already in the chat. Sometimes it's easier to start a new chat, which doesn't contain the wrong idea.
But my point is that you also then have to go back to your
Yeah.
documentation that's been created and make sure that none
Yeah.
of that bad information is in
And this
there
is
because
and this
it'll
is
come right
again
back
why
in.
I prefer files. I can ask it
Yeah,
to update them. In your case, what I would do then is say, hey, I migrated and my documentation is wrong. Can you go find out the wrong? And it will not even need to read the files. It will then just use search first to find the files where the old link is, and go
right.
and then change only them without even maybe reading them in full. Because like search actually gives it context around, and it can just go and edit out
Yeah.
the parts. So I kind of like that more. Like I feel more in control of having those in files that it can change.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just saying that as the user, you need to at least make sure that everything has been changed, even after you ask, because sometimes it misses. And that one little line somewhere and buried in a file that you don't notice, it'll be the one thing that Claude latches onto and says, "Oh, this is."
Yeah. But as I said, like the trick I use then, if I notice that this happens, I ask it why, and it actually can point that, hey,
Okay.
this is what I was told to, or whatever. So not always. It can like I do feel like the anthropic models are actually pretty good about not hallucinating about this kind of stuff. Like if you
Yeah.
ask and there is a reason, usually it can explain the reason quite well for you to understand where the problem is.
Right. That's fine.
Uh, yeah.
But I'll
So
show you yesterday that D3 thing that I moved over. This is all the files that it created in that one go. It moved all of these over, and it had to put them into a new file structure as well because the D3 project had a source file, and the
yeah,
the website
it's
did not.
sometimes crazy what it does.
It
To be
did it.
honest,
It pulled it off.
I was like, I have a presentation to give on Tuesday in the evening to local
Uh huh.
DevOps and AI community. And it's like 10 minutes. And I wanted to like 5 minutes brief introduction to MCPs and how they work, and then 5 minutes like let's show what desktop commander can pull off for DevOps people. And I was thinking, okay, show me like there is GitHub. GitHub has actions. You can have like continuous integration and delivery pipeline in there set up completely through API. Like you have access to API, you have access to files. Create me a repo, create the flow, create a PR that fails the test. The thing, let's show the demo. Show the demo of
Right.
the full DevOps thingy. Like, and it freaking did. It opened the pages. I see the flow. Like it's like what?
Yeah, it's pretty surprising, and I think as you start using four, I think you'll notice some pretty interesting things. I mean, like I showed you, the scale of the tool calls that it did was
Yeah,
just
yeah. I mean,
it's
I think
crazy.
they announced that it's like they have tasks where it worked for 7 hours and interrupted without losing actually what it's trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Which honestly is freaking 7 hours on one goal, trying to solve it, and
I
actually
don't know how
solving
it
it in seven
managed.
hours.
I don't know how. I mean, does it have some sort of automatic like refreshing thing, or that was just on one prompt and it just
That's a
kept
good
delegating to
question.
sub agents?
That's a good question. I wonder what they used internally, because one thing that is different and interesting about how OpenAI does it, like there are different strategies how to manage the context. I know that in Claude desktop they just don't do it. It just
Yeah,
runs into
yeah.
the
You have
end
no
and that's it.
idea.
And but I mean, you can see that this is what they're doing. In Claude Code, they use compaction, so they ask at the end to summarize and start a new chat, but it's invisible a little bit for you, in a sense that they kind of like restart the chat and wait. It's like chat after chat. It's just next chat only no summary of the previous chat.
Mhm.
And I know that ChatGPT, they cut out the start as you're going,
Oh,
so
okay.
it starts to forget the older information, but you can
Hmm.
continue. It remembers a big chunk of the recent communication, and it kind of contains a little bit of the older, like echoes of the start or something. And I have a chat, like I have some chats that are super long. One of them is that I have a chat in ChatGPT where I am like creating, I paste transcripts of my YouTube videos and work on title ideas and descriptions in it. And considering
Mm.
it contains how I usually do that, I just paste the new transcript in the chat. I get some ideas and I assemble what I want from them. And the chat is like 1 or 2 years old.
Wow.
And it's freaking long. It's
I
actually
believe
lagging my browser now, so I'm probably gonna stop using it. But it works.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Not
That's
because
really
it has
interesting.
infinite context. No, it's
Yeah.
cut out. It doesn't probably remember most of it.
The one thing I'm worried about with all this AI is that people are going to start relying so much on it that they're going to lose the skills to do some of this stuff. I mean, like, I wouldn't be able to do any of this
But it's
without.
happening. It's happening. We lost our ability to smell because we got dogs. We lost our ability to remember a lot of stories because we got books.
Mhm.
Because before we did, we lost. I think today's developers mostly lost understanding on how like registers, memory, or whatever works because we don't need to care about it because we are using high-level languages that hid this from us as unnecessarily implementation detail. In the sense that I am not sure this is important. I'm not saying this is a conclusion. I'm saying I'm not sure, though.
Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, this happened before, multiple times.
That's true.
Even
That's
in
true.
coding
I mean,
already.
yeah. Huh. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I've learned a lot. You know, my knowledge in the last few months has grown exponentially because of all the new things that I've been exposed to and all the reading that I've done and then observing, you know, things that have been implemented that worked and things that haven't. You know, so I'm definitely not a coder. I can definitely understand a lot of what I'm reading in code a lot better than I could before. And I can get a sense when I'm watching Claude working if it's on the right track or not a lot better than I could when I started. So in those regards, I definitely agree that it's a logical next step in our evolution. I'm just the only worry I have is that it's such a big step that it could start making people a little bit more complacent about trying to retain knowledge personally on how to do things because I can just ask Claude, I can just ask ChatGPT, and you know the thinking that we've built over you know our evolution might start falling off for some people. I'm a little worried about, but you know time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, I think maybe most common.
Especially kids going to school now. You know they're cheating and they're you know getting their papers written for them by AI and you know, I mean, you and
I
I
think
grew up where we had to do the work ourselves still.
there is one thing that I was like trying to break my mind that I think is relevant about. Like I actually started as a game developer 2 decades ago, and I usually kind of dig into why things work the way they do. And for me,
Mhm.
computer games are magical. And for me, like I learned English playing Fallout 2, if you know that game. Because it was not translated to my language. I was freaking sitting
Yeah.
with the dictionary trying to. But there is something magical about games and play overall. And what I dug out is that it's about education. It's a hack to
Mhm.
like with less risks and resources to simulate the real thing
Yeah.
without the consequences. This is what nature invented, and not for us. Like you can see when dog is playing, we have body language about being in play mode.
Right.
So, but it's driven by dopamine. Like
Mhm.
dopamine is part of the play or game or being satisfied by a game. And for me, what's interesting is that the most successful humans are dopamine addicts. They just
Mm.
found how to correctly use it for
Yeah.
like real things. But then, like going to casino is the same thing, but it's completely pointless.
Gosh, this is so interesting. I've had a lot of these
And
kinds of
for
thoughts
me,
myself too.
like I haven't got to this myself. I was discussing with other colleague who's like good at this kind of psychology things, and he said, I think there is like orthogonal things. There is dopamine that is motivator, and there is completely different ethical, moral, or some kind of like meaningful thing scale of how you use it.
Right.
And you still need to be motivated. You still need dopamine. You just need to use it for meaningful things.
Yeah, I mean, dopamine is it's a motivator, right? Because I mean, you get the reward for accomplishing something, and then it gives you that reward that makes you want to accomplish it again.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned video games because you know I'm not a huge gamer, but yeah, I like to play like Escape from Tarkov with my brother and my best friend, and I like playing the flight simulators, and you know that would be before February. You know, I wasn't playing every night or even close to it, but you know, it was my escape. It was my way of having fun. Since February, I've hardly played any video games,
This
and
is the
every
game
night
now, right?
it is. It's crazy because I don't know if you've played Escape from Tarkov, but you know that kind of a game. You're grinding and
Yeah,
grinding
it's
and
hard.
grinding,
It's
and you
satisfying, but hard.
usually fail. But when you succeed, it is the biggest
Yeah.
feeling of elation. And it's the same thing here. You're grinding and grinding and grinding, and there can be days that go by where you don't have any tangible results, and then suddenly everything just clicks, it falls into place, it all lines up, and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you want to do it again. And so I can see for, you know, like an addictive personality, that could be dangerous. At least here you're not doing, bodily damage with, drugs or something else like that. But and here it's better, I think, than video games because you're actually moving yourself forward as opposed to, ultimately wasting time on a video game.
One last thing I can say about this is that I think there are two modes that humans operate on. One is awareness, and we train it with meditation. And it is a way to like step back and watch at who you are, where you are, whatever, like depending on the meditation. And it's important. I see this as a like how it's like there's tactics and strategy. And then there is this mode of chasing the goal you set up for yourself. And this is dopamine, this is game, this is addiction, blah, blah, blah. But you need to then stop and step back and say, okay, is it like you need to regularly stop and like switch to awareness to, okay, am I chasing the right goal? Is it meaningful?
Yeah, that's exactly
because it's a good super focus mode for achieving goals, but it says nothing about what goals you're achieving.
And you can bring that all the way back to Desktop Commander and Claude and your AI tasks, because you do the same thing. You let it go for a while, and you can see, like, from here, I have to stop it after a certain point and say, okay, let's just kind of assess here. Don't forget we're supposed to do this. You need to step back for a second here. One other thing that I'm just going to say for the Desktop Commander and Claude, just a tip that I've learned: when you get toward the end of your context window, sometimes you'll get a glitch and you'll see something pop up in the corner here that, I don't know exactly what it says, but something will pop up for a second or two, and if you miss it, you'll never notice it. But if that pops up and your chat continues going, and then all of a sudden it just crashes and it reverts back to your previous chat, that's actually not always the worst thing, because if you're doing a bug fixing chat, you can often get 5 or 6 more prompts out of that chat with all of the context that you've already built up. And I've actually gotten through some really long.
But you can do it differently.
Bug fixing.
You can do it differently. There is a button for edit.
Yeah. Yep. Right here.
It's the same thing.
I've used that. I've used that too.
It's the same thing. It's just that without the bug. Like what you were mentioning.
But does it? If the chat is successful,
it's like a parallel version of that chat. It forgets what was after the edit, and it allows you to resume the code. Like one thing that
it'll pull back the context.
Yeah. So like I think there is multiple things to go over here. Firstly, the thing you mentioned in the top right corner is that there are 2 types of mistakes that are happening with Claude when it's trained. One of them is that it loses connection, and when it loses connection, it does roll back. It doesn't know about the chat part that didn't finish. Or other part is that it says that they have a capacity issue, and the same thing happens. I dislike that. I think they should have actually left where it stopped, and you could continue or whatever. Because currently, I think for textual chats, okay, it didn't finish, but for something like Desktop Commander, it actually went and changed files, run commands, maybe set something up, and forgot about it.
Yeah, then you have no record of it.
And it's bad. You don't know what happened. It doesn't know what happened. It's bad.
Yeah. Sometimes you get lucky. Like last night, that happened to me, and I got lucky. It moved a lot of files into place, and it wiped out that first half of the chat, and I was able to rerun it, and it scanned what it had done already, and it just moved the rest of the files, and it worked. But yeah, sometimes if you're in the middle of something really complicated and it does that, you just if you've previously committed, you probably just want to roll that back and just try again with a fresh commit.
But one more way to use some of it, like the editing that we mentioned, that I wanted to mention, is that there are UX issues in Claude. I hope Anthropic fixes them. I think that the way the fail works is one of them. They need to somehow find a way to leave it for AI and user to introspect what happened before the error. Because now they erase what happened, that this is bad. But another issue that I hope they eventually change is the running into 200,000 token window, because at this point, usually it feels like chat is dead. That's it. There's context and you cannot reuse it even in any way. But one thing you can do is you can go 1 or 2 messages back, hit edit, and ask it to write into a file a context to continue new chat. And then in new chat, ask to read that file and resume. It will lose part of the context. That summary will not be full, but it will allow you to continue this way. So this is one of interesting thing you can do to work.
That's good to know. I didn't know that you could go back and branch off a previous prompt in a completely filled up chat. That's good to know.
Yeah, this is one of the hack, but it's a hack around the UX issue in my view that Claude Desktop has.
I'll just mention one other UX thing that I've noticed, and that's probably partly because of the new Claude model. But in these kind of situations where it's just going and going and going and going and going, it gets ahead of itself. Like I'm approving things that it still hasn't even written out that it's doing
There
yet.
is some kind of desync. Yeah, I noticed that as well. It asks about things it didn't show. Yeah, sometimes. Or sometimes it asks about a thing, but it already went on.
Yeah.
Like there are some weird issues in their UX for now. I hope they will be.
Hey, we're trying to tame the beast here. This is the cutting edge.
Yeah.
I did have one question, one more question. Do I need to do anything to actually update Desktop Commander, or does it update automatically behind the scenes?
It's a good question. I think multiple people ask it multiple times, so it's good to visit that. Firstly, it depends on how you install it, because you can install it through Symmetry or NPX, or check out the code and run it locally. But if you're installing it through NPX or Symmetry, it does update on restart of Claude.
Okay.
Otherwise, when you see updates, we usually publish a version, like the latest one is 0.2.1. And there is some change list. And what you can do, we recently added, you can now ask, what is my Desktop Commander version? You can just write it now in the chat, and it should give you a version. I think one additional thing that we're going to do in future is that we're probably going to also put into the prompt, it takes the config, and it tells you it's 0.2.1, it is the latest one. I do think we want to also add a link to release log, so that you from there can go and see what wasn't those releases. Otherwise, we could prompt you like, hey, you got updated for whatever the reason. But I think it's distraction. Like if you want to know what your version is, you can ask. Otherwise, we will not bother you. But yeah, you can see that it's the latest for you.
Yeah, I installed it through Smithery. So great. That clears that up. Thanks.
Anyways, thank you. I think this was a great discussion. I think our viewers will get a lot of value out of it.
I hope so. And thank you for all the work that you're doing and for creating Desktop Commander. It's definitely enabled me to move forward and get me unstuck, which is great. And I'm now going out to start fundraising again, and we're trying to bring AirPro to market at the end of this year. So any HVAC contractors or general contractors or custom integrators that want to sign up as dealers, homeowners that are interested in learning more about the product, or investors who are actively seeking investment to bring to market, please get in touch. You'll have a link to my LinkedIn and the website in the description of the video.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you.
Yeah. So that's the video. I hope you found it useful. If so, don't forget to leave a like, share with others who you think may benefit from it, leave your feedback and questions and comments. I will answer all of them, or share your stories that are similar to Michael's story. And if you want to see more videos like that, don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.